Good evening. Let's go. What a great one we're about to have here. We have Jennette Pu- Puzzo, who is the VP of events for the basketball tournament. So I know you guys know what the basketball tournament is. If you don't know all about it, you're going to know a lot more about it after this. So thanks for jumping on. B minor with the X Factor. Let's go.
X Factor's in the house. Super duper excited to hear about TBT today, the basketball tournament. Jennette's going to share some great words of wisdom about it. You know, she, of course, was a VP of that. So, you know, she obviously knows a thing or two about it. And it was extremely fun to watch. That Travis Diener shot was absolutely unbelievable. I actually played with Travis Diener's cousin. His name is John Diener, and he went to DePaul for a year. So I had a little bit of, resemblance. That one hit home when he hit that shot. That was awesome.
Agreed.
Love it. Yeah, that's one of the cool things with that being one of the first sports back. Everybody was talking about the TBT this year because it was kind of a trial run back from sports from the pandemic. So everybody was tuned in, and I felt like a lot of people that I knew in the basketball world knew somebody that was playing. So whenever I talked to a coach, they're like, "Oh, yeah, I know." And for me, it was Pooh, who we had on the show a little bit earlier from Overseas Elite, and we're gonna have some stories. We're gonna chop it up about them, but that was pretty cool for me personally. And then a coach that I had just interviewed was coaching one of the teams, so it was pretty awesome to see so many people that people kind of had that 1 degree of separation with. Yeah. So Jennette, thanks for joining us.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to this, hearing a little bit more about the bubble. Definitely want to touch on the Elam ending, kind of a different way to finish a basketball game. And for me as a basketball junkie, I'm a big fan of it. So I kind of want to hear a little bit about that. So maybe just, would you take us through kind of how you got connected with the basketball tournament and how that kind of came about for you to be working for them?
Yeah, so basically back in 2012, at the time I was the director of marketing for an IT media company as my full-time job. And then on the side, I was doing promotions for the Boston Bruins and helping out at the TD Garden where they played with other events that were going on, concerts and other events they had there, doing behind the scenes tours and things like that. And then my third job was I was the chapter president of Women in Sports and Events, is a nationwide nonprofit for women that work in sports and events, and I was the president of the Boston chapter. And so what happened back in 2012 was the woman who started Olive Wise, she connected this woman, Jen, who was moving from New York and was a member of the New York chapter, to me, and saying, you know, basically, Jen, you should meet Jennette. She's the president of the Boston chapter. So you guys should, you know, link up and get involved once you move to Boston. So at first, Jen and I were emailing about Wise and trying to figure out a time to get together and have coffee. And then before we had a chance to actually get together, she sent me a follow-up email. And she basically told me that she's part of this new company, the basketball tournament, and they were at that point looking for regional event managers. And so she wanted me to circulate the job description to the Wise Boston database. And so I opened the attachment and read the description. And so it's like, all right, basketball, you know, the sport that I've played my entire life and am more passionate about than anything else. And then the job responsibilities spanning events and marketing, which was everything I had done in my professional career. And then there was also actually a reality TV component back then, which is my guilty pleasure. And so that was also exciting to read. So it was literally everything written up into a job description that I was either passionate about or experienced in. And so I was actually driving, so I probably shouldn't have been looking at my phone, but I pulled over and I emailed Jen back and I said, yeah, no, I know someone that would be a good candidate for this role. And so she and I met up shortly thereafter, talked about TBT, talked about Wise. And then, long story short, for the following 2 years, we stayed in touch. We would still meet up here and there. And I was waiting and hoping for this job to come to fruition because they were still figuring out, you know, getting a network deal and getting sponsorship interest. And so it was like this dream job kind of dangling for 2 years, and I took another opportunity. I worked at Spartan Race for a year before finally I got that email from Jen saying, I have budget approval to add your role. And so then I joined full-time in January of 2015. So this was my 6th TBT this year.
And there's been how many?
7 total. So in 2014, that was basically our pilot year. So we had a much smaller scaled, it was 1 location, actually probably most comparable to this year, 32 teams, $500,000 grand prize. And the goal that year was really to put on the event so that potential sponsors could see that it was a legitimate, product, and that the players would know that it's professionally run and that they're actually going to get paid at the end. And so I did help out on site in 2014, but we didn't have full-time staff until 2015.
So you were one of, how many people were involved when they hired you full-time?
So there were 4 of us that were full-time. So John, the founder, Jen, myself, and Dan. And then we had people that would obviously work the event, but they were on contract, usually from January until the event wrapped up in August. And then we obviously have a lot of partners that we work with on site. So we have an operations partner agency that helps out with a lot of the on-court execution. And then when we have fans, we also have more of a game day ops event agency that we also work with to help with a lot of those game day responsibilities. So it takes a full team effort on site, but behind the scenes, we're actually a very lean team. We currently have 9 full-time staff. So
you're part of a very short list of people that really got this popping off. So I want to tell you, personally, I appreciate it because I really enjoy watching the TBT selfishly, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. So I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you.
It's great to hear. I mean, honestly, when I heard the concept in 2012, I thought I was so excited about it too. And everyone I think that I met, I was already telling about it. And I was, because people will ask, what do you do for work? And so I would tell them what I was currently doing, but then I would say, however, there's this amazing opportunity, and I'd start talking about TBT. And so I felt like I was promoting it before I was even on the team, full time. And so it's great to obviously meet people that know about it and that watch it. And I think a lot of times they'll say, oh yeah, that's that, now $2 million tournament on ESPN, but they don't know that it's called TBT, or kind of more of the intricate details around kind of the fan element and some of those other unique aspects that we also added on.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because that's one of the things that's cool is you can win money, real money, not just for playing. Like, you don't have to be any good at basketball in this thing, and you can still win money.
Exactly.
Talk to us a little bit about how the fan component and the manager and kind of how all that works.
Yeah, so it's evolved over the course of the last 6 years, but essentially if you vote online, so you go on thetournament.com, you find the team that you want to support, and all you do is enter your email address and support that team. And if the team that you support ultimately wins the normally $2 million, this year it was $1 million, the fans of that team actually split a portion of the winnings. So last year, when it was $2 million, the fan prize was split, it was $200,000 that was split across all the fans of that team. This year, the Golden Eagles, I think ultimately it ended up being about $800 per fan, I think. So we changed it up a little bit this year where it was split evenly. Every fan got the same amount. In years past, it was a little bit more complicated. I don't know if you guys voted or were familiar with how it worked in prior years, but basically we tried to make it a little bit more interactive. And if you did certain things like followed us on Twitter, you get 50 points. If you retweeted something, you get, whatever it was, 10 points. But the biggest way to earn points was to share the link once you signed up with your friends. And so if they then signed up, then you would get credit for them. And so it was a way to leverage our fan base to promote TBT on our behalf. And so initially, back in 2015, the first year that we did it, Overseas Elite won for their first of 4 consecutive championships. And I was the one behind the scenes after contacting all of the winning fans, and maybe, I don't even know, 90% of them had no idea they were actually winning money. They just thought, oh, a friend of mine or my brother or whoever it was reached out, asked me to vote. I did, and now I'm winning $500, $1,000, whatever it was. And so I'm, going down the list, and just like, these people have no idea, and they don't realize it's real too. Some of them are like, is this spam? Is this real? And so the first couple of years, there were a lot of familiar last names as I was going down the list. I'm like, oh, that's, so-and-so's relative. And then I think it's a little bit more competitive and open now, where you see a lot more fans of that alumni team or general TBT fans that are voting. So, but it's something that I feel like gets hidden a lot of the times in the messaging. So I'm always telling my friends, vote. It's easy to do, and you might win, a good chunk of change just by taking the few seconds to vote online. It makes it more fun when you're watching too, obviously, if you have a vested interest in a team.
I'll tell you what, that's definitely not too shabby. Win a couple $100, almost $1,000 for supporting a team. That's not the worst thing in the world. So yeah, TBT is really doing it big.
Yeah,
that's incredible. That
20,000.
People don't even know.
Right.
People don't know. And that's one thing. The spread is, I think that's brilliant what you guys did as far as like using the fans you already have to market to more people, because I know you say there's still people that are like, oh, well, that's the $2 million tournament on ESPN. Mm-hmm. Those are people not in the basketball world. Anybody in the basketball world now, if you don't know about the Elam ending and TBT, hello.
Yeah.
Dame Lillard's good at basketball. Hello, the TBT's legit.
It's so true. There is, like you said, that core passionate basketball, circle. And so everyone I've met that is in that world, whether they're a coach or a former player, they absolutely know about TBT. And it's so much fun, obviously, to talk to someone who knows about it. But then, like you said, kind of the next layer of the circle is people who casually have ESPN on and they see it, but they're not sure exactly what it is. So there's definitely still, I feel like, a lot of that that we're educating about. But I think this year there was more of a spotlight on TBT, and also during the NBA All-Star game when they implemented the Elam ending, I think also gave us a lot of additional traction. So I think, the numbers are going up as far as people becoming more aware of what TBT is, which is great.
You're crushing it, and you're a big part of that.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I appreciate you joining us and telling us some more. Pont, here's some exciting news. I'm gonna see if I can make Jennette co-host here. Okay. We have a surprise. We have a fan of yours. So,
I love surprises.
Jennette, do you know how to do that now?
Yes. Let me see.
I think you're a co-host. So screen share, maybe.
Should I show it first and then explain it, or explain what I'm about to show?
Yeah, show the video, and then you can explain how
I'm excited now.
Get such great footage.
All right, let's see. I'm going to do share screen, and then I'm going to do desktop share, and then pull up a video.
Okay. I like that picture.
That is a beautiful photo.
It's beautiful.
It's a guy I know. My husband Dave.
Look at this. X Factor.
Uh-oh. I know that guy.
Look at this. That's game time.
Look at that. To feel that.
You have a fan and you didn't even know it.
That's amazing. I need some explanation for this. Who took the video?
I did.
That was you?
Yeah. So.
No way.
I didn't know who you were. I had no idea that obviously we would now be doing this interview together. So basically last year, I don't know if it was March maybe last year, I was in Chicago and I was doing a site visit at Wintrust Arena, which was an option for our championship location, and ultimately was our championship location. And so whenever I go on site and meet with the staff and get a lay of the land, if there's a home game, then I usually want to stick around to see how they run their game ops and all that on their game days. And so it was a DePaul home game against Georgetown, and late in the game when they were up by whatever it was, 30 plus points, all of a sudden this player comes in and the crowd goes crazy, and I had no idea why, but I took out my phone and I recorded it because it was hilarious and a highlight of the game, even though it was in the final seconds and not a close game at all. So I knew you before I knew you.
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, you picked the perfect game to come to, because that was – I think that was the best game of the season for me too, because that was great. I don't always get to get in. But that's amazing. Thanks for the support, first and foremost, because that's sweet. And I'm glad you guys ultimately ended up choosing Wintrust because it's a great facility. But, yeah, how about that, though? Small world. You could not have picked a better game to come to. And now here we are.
I love it. Yep. Well
That
done.
was pretty cool. And she said, I think I know that guy. I think I know him. And I was like, and she sent me that video. I was like, yep, that's him. The
I still
crowd
have that much
was
energy too, but now the only difference is the hair. It was time to make a change.
Looks good.
So let's talk a little bit about the bubble. So the bubble, obviously, if you're watching this, you've heard of the coronavirus, I would assume. So we know that it's killing people and it's extremely contagious, and those things are hard to argue. There's a lot that we don't know, but those things are tough to argue. So to have a tournament where people are coming into contact with each other during a worldwide global pandemic is kind of risky. So talk to us a little bit about how you guys came up with the protocol and how all that was kind of handled.
Yeah, so it was a crazy year, as it was or is for everybody. We started off the year with our original plan, which was going to be 8 regional locations and then a championship location. And so January, February, we were just starting to, get into those discussions with each of the venues to talk through all the planning. And then coronavirus happened and the brakes, were pumped, and we honestly, like everyone, didn't know what the future was going to hold. And so every day there was new information about testing, and we're obviously paying attention to what all the other leagues were doing, including the overseas leagues. And we just had Zoom calls literally every single day to check in. And I think it started where we still thought there was a high percentage chance that we could have the event as we planned to. But then we had, a small percentage chance that maybe we have a scaled back version and it's just, half of the sites maybe. And then there was a very small chance that, we don't have the event at all. And so every day we kind of re-gauged, okay, now we're thinking it's probably not likely we're going to be able to do the full-fledged TBT. So we might have to have less regions. And then ultimately it became very clear that the only way to have a safe tournament was to have one location. So now the decision was, what location are we going to play in? And that was tricky for a number of reasons. All of the venues that we were talking to, they were also trying to figure out what their plan was. And so for the universities that we were going to play on their campus, they were still, some of them still are today, trying to figure out when the students are going to come back on campus, when the student athletes are going to come back on campus, when those student athletes are going to need access to the venues on campus that we were planning to use. And so it was tricky because a lot of them, weren't able to commit early enough for when we needed them to in order to start planning the event and have it held in June. And a lot of them too were concerned about, if we bring TBT on campus when students aren't allowed on campus, the optics of how that looks to people, outside looking in. And so we were talking to each of the regions that we were initially planning to go to, whether it was Columbus as one, Dayton, Wichita, and having these concurrent discussions to figure out where we were going to go. And OSU is where we were supposed to have the Columbus Regional. When that started to feel like they couldn't get to a final answer quick enough, we pivoted, one of the many times that we pivoted now, to look at Nationwide Arena. And fittingly, or I guess to our benefit, the same management that oversees the OSU rental also oversees Nationwide's rental. So I'd already been in touch with some of the right folks. And then we had also already been talking to the Hyatt as one of our potential hotel options. And so we really needed all of our partners to understand all the different health and safety protocols that we had been discussing on our team calls and be able to implement that for us. And so the Hyatt was one of the only hotels that was willing to allow us to essentially take over the entire hotel. We couldn't have any other guests staying there when we're staying there, for the chance of, them potentially bringing in COVID and infecting any of the players. So the Hyatt also, like other hotels, was dealing with furloughed staff. And so they had a much smaller staff to be able to accommodate us. And they were amazing on site, being able to do everything we asked them to do. The venue, normally, like with DePaul or Wintrust Arena, I would go to the venue at least a couple of times before being on site to do the walkthrough and get a feel for where we're going to set things up and meet the contacts in person. without being able to do that this year, it was a lot of virtual calls and needing them to really help me with doing, signage, site surveys and things like that to make sure, all the key boxes were checked, and then the rest I knew once I got on site I could figure out. But Nationwide Arena as a partner, Hyatt Regency as a partner, and the Convention Center, which was attached to the Hyatt, were all essential in order to make the bubble work. And so the Hyatt is about 2 blocks away from the arena. And so the arena itself, there were certain health and safety aspects that we were thinking through as far as the setup. Obviously no fans, unfortunately, not having any of the table staff be on the same side like they normally would on the side of where the benches are, and having, plexiglass sneeze guards in front of the tables and all that. And then the bigger beast to figure out was at the hotel, all the other moments in the day when teams aren't playing, what are they doing, and thinking through literally every step once they get there to the moment that they leave. And so we continued to evolve that plan. Once we got on site, there were changes that we were still making. Our staff, we got there 5 days prior to when any teams were going to arrive, one, so that I could see the venue and figure out the plan there, but also set up at the hotel and kind of get through. All of us, went through 3 tests, day 1, day 3, day 5, and also before we even, came on site, before any of the teams got there. And so once the teams got there, basically we had them, first do a temperature check, give them a mask if they weren't wearing a mask. And then there were a series of steps that they did beyond that before they got to their hotel room. So we made sure that they had taken their test at home, that we had a negative test result. That was the next major checkpoint. And then we gave them their own hygiene kit. And so every team had their own, team credential and a color-coded mask. And the credential was also color-coded to match that. And so kind of thinking through, it's not just our TBT staff, but it's also the security and all the other people that are helping us enforce all the guidelines that need to know from afar, okay, that person is where they should be or where they shouldn't be. So there were a lot of signage and, supplies that we thought through to make sure that we could oversee the bubble and all the rules within it. They then, went through their security check, had all their bags checked, and then they would take another test. After they took their test, they got their merchandise bag, and then they checked into the hotel, and they stayed in their hotel room until we got that next negative test result back. So it was hard for everyone, even the staff, like sitting in your hotel room for 24 hours. We all know from being in isolation now with COVID, kind of how crazy it can make you sometimes, but we, it was very important that everyone took a test before they came on site so we could weed out anyone that tested positive, and important for the team too. And so we encouraged all the teams that were going to practice before getting on site to do tests before they started their training camp, so they could weed out if anyone did test positive before infecting the entire team and then therefore becoming ineligible. So once they took their first test on site after traveling there, again, if there were any positive results, then that person couldn't play in TBT. After that, once they're released, everyone was so excited once you get your negative test result back. That was the most nerve-wracking moment. I think every single day when you knew you had taken a test the prior day, opening up your email, like even if I knew I did absolutely everything right, I wore my mask, I washed my hands, I didn't talk to anybody, or I didn't, get within 6 feet of anybody, it was still nerve-wracking to open it and breathe a sigh of relief when you saw a negative. And that was, for the 7 tests that I took throughout the duration. But basically after they got out of the isolation period, they were still, their schedule every day was set for them. So whether it was where you get your meal and when you get your meal, when you practice and which practice court you use, when you take your next test, meeting rooms, we had every team had their own meeting room. And so they could, play video games, play cards. All the feedback we got was actually really positive because a lot of these guys, played together in college. And so it was fun for them to spend all that time together and have some laughs and reminisce and all that. And you create, I think when you have that off court bond, it is reflected on court. And so everyone was amazing. And, that was the big question mark going in, because you plan and you plan and you plan, but you don't know until you get on site. And this was a first for all of us. And so we're kind of a little bit figuring it out as we went, but knowing that we were going to have ultimately 27 teams on site, and everyone is a grown adult, and we're asking them to do so much more than we've ever asked them to do before. You know, in the past it was get there on time for your game, wear the right jersey, and sign the participation agreement. And this year it was a laundry list of everything we needed them to do. And so thankfully everyone, you know, bought into it. They adhered to the guidelines. They were appreciative of all of the rules and regulations because they knew it was for their benefit, for all of our benefit, that everyone stayed healthy. And that was our number one priority throughout the entire event. And so I'm just super grateful and glad that we all made it out on the other side and everyone did stay healthy, and competitive basketball was ultimately played, and a new champion was crowned. So very, very happy that we made it out to the other side, and can look back and sigh of relief and a feeling of accomplishment for having done it.
Well, one thing's for sure, all of that protocol did a wonderful job of giving me and a lot of other people hope, because I know for me personally, all this time we're sitting at home, especially us, you know, people who are crazy about hoops, whether it's NBA, college, anything. So I'm sitting at home, you know, and I'm watching NBA TV, reruns. In the captions of the reruns, it tells you what's going to happen. So I'm like, okay, I'm watching this game. I already know it's going to happen. Yeah. Then I see TBT come on, and I'm seeing highlights of it on Twitter and all this good stuff. And I'm like, is this live basketball again? Like, are we really back? That's the first live basketball that I saw personally since, and it had to have been some of the first live basketball that was put on as a whole. So I was like, wow, you know, maybe we're close to getting back, you know, because obviously I'm missing my DePaul family. I'm back home. So I'm like, man, this is crazy. You know, we're getting steps and steps closer. And now we're to a point where we have a bubble here with the TBT and people are playing and it seems like everything's going well. The tournament went to the end. We crowned a champion. And I was like, hey, you know, and step by step, things are getting better and better and better. So you definitely gave me and a lot of other people.
Awesome.
And it went off really well from the outside. I know I think you had a plan and you had to adapt and adjust along the way, but I think that's a lesson in leadership is you don't just go into it blind. You have to have options, you have to have plans, and then sometimes you have to adjust those plans, but some people either stick to those plans so hard fast that they don't get anywhere, or they don't even have a plan, I guess, right? So you guys did a great job adjusting. I know there were some teams that you had to, you know, cut because they had somebody test positive, which was probably a difficult call. Tell us a little bit about what happened, you are the weakest link. Talk to us a little bit about how teams were eliminated from the TBT this year.
Yeah, so for those, I guess, not familiar with TBT's format, it's single game elimination. So normally, you know, if you play and you lose, that's the only way that you get eliminated from the event. And it's winner take all, 2 million. So only the team at the end is the one that walks away with the prize. But this year, because of COVID and our bubble, if there were any positive tests before they got on site, then just that player was eliminated. If they had started doing training camps, then all of the players on that team had to also take a test to see if they would test positive. And so before getting on site, there was somewhat of a weeding process. And then once you got on site, you would take, like I was saying earlier, that first test upon arrival. If you tested positive the next day, we had an isolation wing, we called it, within the hotel that we were staying at. And so we had a few players that were up there. Based on the laws in Ohio, you have to be isolated for 10 days after testing positive. And so there were a few guys, and they were all, again, fantastic as far as being understanding and staying in their room. And we brought them up all their meals, and we did have security up there as well to make sure no one left that floor. I guess in between too, if someone came on site and we didn't have their test result back yet, because there were, you know, with the testing company that we were using, you had to send your saliva test tube in the mail. And so there were some occasions where it just, because of the mail system not always being 100% reliable, it wasn't their fault. We just didn't have the results yet. And so we did have them also go to a different hotel for that first night, or until we got a negative test result back. But so as long as they had not made it to the period of time where they were all practicing together, it was just a one-off. Okay, that player needs to go into isolation, or that player can't compete. But once they got past that point and they're practicing together and eating their meals together and all that, then unfortunately if someone tested positive, then the entire team was eliminated. And so we had 3 teams that were on standby that came and quarantined with us starting on the 29th. So the first games were on July 4th. So we had all the teams that were playing July 4th got there 5 days prior to their first game, so that they had time to go through test 1. And I think on day 3, 4, and 5, we had them test. And so these standby teams were, there for the, unfortunate scenario if a team did get eliminated, that we could slot them in to their spot in the bracket. And so that happened with 3 teams. And so those 3 standby teams all got placed into one of the slots for the first game day. And then we did have one team that was supposed to play in the second round. They got a first round bye and they had a player test positive. And so, so ultimately we had 23 teams that competed. But you saw the percentage go down and down once we got past, I think, that third testing day. Then it was 0% positive test rate. So again, kind of, like you were saying, Pont, about the hope of it working. It's like, that's when I think we first started to see, yeah, no, it does work. It's like the beforehand, you can't really control that except for telling people you should be doing X, Y, and Z. And then when they get on site, we're enforcing it, but there's still, that lag where you could test positive kind of days after being exposed. But then once you get past that 4 or 5 day period and everyone that you're interacting with is all adhering to those same rules, then there shouldn't be any positive tests. And now we're seeing that, go successfully, and knock on wood, hopefully it continues to, but with the NBA and the WNBA doing a very similar format, hopefully they continue to also have the same success rate and no positive tests going forward.
That's awesome. What about, so we talked a little bit about when a team was eliminated. So kind of like the old school days, AAU tournament, the last day of the tournament, you pack up all your stuff. So tell us a little bit about how those teams, once they lost a game, were sent home.
Yes, the hardest part always, you're happy for the team that won, and then you're consoling the teams that lose. And it's really hard now too, having done this for 6 years, because it's like a family reunion every year. Like these guys, the teams that come back year over year, they're just all such great guys, and you want all of them to win. And so it stinks to then have to go up to them and remind them of what the post-game protocol is for the team that loses. And this year, it was a little bit different because we didn't want any of the teams who had lost to stay in the bubble, because once they lost, they didn't really have the same incentive to adhere to all of the guidelines, and they might want to go out that night and drown their sorrows. And so what we did, similar to the reality TV format, was before the game was played, the 2 teams would bring their suitcases down to the hotel lobby and we would store it for them. And then once the game ended, our staff would take the losing team's suitcases over to a different hotel, and the winning team could come back and get their stuff and go right up back to the room that they were in. But the losing team would be escorted to the losing team hotel and spend that last night there. And so some of them, if they lived within driving distance or were just eager to get home and leave Columbus, then they could catch their own flight and head out of there. But for the ones that wanted to stay one more night or needed to stay one more night because it was a late game, we had a separate accommodation set up for them.
I think that's motivation, right? Like, you pack your bags, you don't want to have to check out of the hotel. And so, I mean, I think that's awesome that it was kind of that format of you pack your bags. If you win, you get to go back and kind of have a little relaxation. If you lose, you're on the next bus out of the hotel.
Sayonara. Hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, so tough. And we had other protocols too, now that I'm thinking through the whole process, that like before they left the arena too, we would collect their credential so they couldn't, because the security didn't know, again, who every single player was. So if someone walked back in and they had a credential, like, okay, green credential, you're whatever in this quadrant, but took their credential. The other stuff wasn't so bad. It was just giving them a voucher for their parking and asking if they're staying the night so we could make sure that the rooming list was accurate. and things like that. But the taking the credential and then trying to console them when there's nothing you can say at that point, you just lost your chance at $1 million. But overall, everyone handled it so well. Like I was, devastated for them, and they're like, yeah, smile on their face. You win some, you lose some. It was a great experience. We're appreciative for the opportunity to play basketball and get out of the house and be reunited with our friends and all that, and have the opportunity to play on ESPN and be a part of a historic, return to sports. And so they all handled it really, really well. I just felt terrible for them when it happens.
Talk about a little bit overseas elite. For those that don't know, they won 4 straight TBT championships. They didn't lose a game in 4 years. They won $7 million, I think, total. That's just incredible. Puzzo, who was on B minor in the X Factor earlier, played for overseas elite this year. Unfortunately, their luck ran out a little bit this year. They had a loaded squad and met some tough competition. But tell us a little bit about I know when we were talking earlier, sharing us that initial story about overseas elite.
Yeah, it's crazy because I was with them their very first game, which was back in 2015. They played in the South Regional in Atlanta at Clayton State. And that year we actually had 97 teams in the bracket. And so we went with the format of 24 teams in each of the 4 regions. And then the team that won the 2014 tournament, a Notre Dame alumni team, they got into the round of 16. So we had a Super 17 that year. So technically it was 97 teams. So with all those teams and all the coordination, there was some last minute obstacles that came into view with teams that, had injuries or just schedules not aligning. And so they weren't able to play. And so we had some teams that unfortunately dropped off right before game day, and overseas elite was right on the cusp. And we didn't want to have any more teams drop out. And, I think it was the night before, we're still talking through how to reshuffle the schedule to accommodate some of these teams that are, struggling to get there on time or have enough players. And so overseas elite was one of the teams that we changed the schedule for so that they would have 5 players to be able to play that first game. And so the GM at the time was driving he went to pick up the 5th player, Travis Bader, at the airport, and was driving him to Clayton State right before the game started. And so if you asked me at that point, is this the team that's going to win, the $1 million that year? I said, heck no way. This team has it together. And they won that first game with 5 players. And then once they got out of the South Regional and made it to the Super 17, I think they added someone, maybe a couple players at that point, but they advanced out of the Super 17, made it to our championship location. And when they won it, I couldn't believe it. It was like, I can't believe you guys are the ones that won this whole thing. And then to win it for 3 more years, and they obviously, over the course of year over year, they added some new players, they lost some key guys, and the field itself kept getting more and more competitive. And so I was like, how are they still winning when there's so many other extremely talented teams, and to go undefeated that long, it was just insane. But they're, great group of guys. I was always happy for them, but I was like, someone's got to finally take them down. And so last year, finally, the Carmen's Crew, Ohio State alumni team did it, and they also could not be a greater group of guys. And so I was very happy for them. But yeah, it's crazy to think back that, the TBT history books would be completely different if we weren't able to accommodate them, switch the schedule and get that first game in back in 2015. But this year, they had added Joe Johnson and some other guys in their roster that made them seem, again, unbeatable. And then, unfortunately, they lost DJ Kennedy and DeAndre Kane before they came on site. Those 2 tested positive. And so they lost some talent, but they still had a lot of talent. And to get beaten by sideline cancer, great story with sideline cancer, but I'm sure not many people had picked them to upset overseas elite. And even the other game in that bracket with the money team losing to Herd, that the Marshall alumni team was also a big upset. And so there was a lot of exciting, matchups that happened. And when overseas elite is playing, there's a big target on their back. So they've been fun to watch, and a very talented group of guys over the years.
Well, one thing's for sure, over those 4 years, I bet their fans and supporters absolutely loved getting that check at the end, or however you make the payment.
Right. That's what I told people.
Here.
I was like, just vote for overseas elite. Like, you might as well, you know? It's like
Like a
right
dividend
for the
getting paid
Patriots
back
in
to
the
you.
NFL. Yeah.
Roll the
7
dice.
million.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Roll it. If you're gonna pick a team, go with the favorite. If you don't know anything else about it, but well, if you're watching, you guys know we do a quote or we bring something to the table, and so we let Jennette know. So she has a couple quotes that were meaningful and impactful, and I thought fit really well with her position at the TBT. And so, Jennette, you want to share with us the knowledge that you're gonna bring?
Sure. I think my professional quote is true leaders do not create followers, they create more leaders, which I've always liked that one. I think it's important to empower other people, empower your team. And then my fun one, which I was debating using or not, but I guess it reflects TBT pretty accurately, is from one of my favorite movies, Talladega Nights. If you ain't first, you last.
Bingo.
Shake and bake.
That's a good one. I love that. And like for the TBT, if you're not first,
It's
like there's no consolation prize. It's one team every year gets the whole check. And I think that just adds to that like pressure and just that excitement. So I love that you came up with that one for your quote. And for sure, Pont and I are both of the mentality of creating other leaders, not creating a bunch of people that want to be like us or follow us, but go out and lead with that positive mindset. So I thought those were awesome quotes.
Now you've got me thinking too, to be that second place finisher in the basketball tournament. And you're like, man, I thought I was about to go home with a big, nice $1 million check, some years $2 million check. And now I'm going home with diddly squat.
It's heartbreaking. My heart breaks for them, honestly. Like my stomach is in knots and I'm not even out there playing, but I just, it's so hard. And to think back over the years too, which I won't, go into more storytelling, but every year it's been really hard. There have been such great teams that have been runner-ups and your heart just breaks for them.
Pont, give us what you had a good one tonight too. Tell us about your quote.
You know what? You know what inspired my quote today? I was literally walking home from practice one day and I was listening to this song and then this came up and then I started looking at all the people around me and I was like, you know what? This is very relevant. The quote is, I don't know what it's like to be you. Okay. This is what hit me so different. I obviously am familiar with my life because I've been living it for 21 years. And obviously it's been a little bit crazier these past couple months, but that's, the same with everybody. And I was looking at all the people around me and I was like, I wonder what this person's life is like. I wonder what this person's life is like. I can try my best to, I suppose, judge a book by its cover. That's obviously not the best thing to do. And it's not going to be accurate either. So you really, any given person, like, I don't know what it's like to be you, Jennette. I don't know what it's like to be you, Brant. Like, I don't know what it's like to be anybody else but myself. So that's my quote, which basically goes in and never judge a book by its cover. Give everybody equally fair treatment. Don't go into any kind of conversation thinking more of somebody or less of somebody. Treat everybody with respect and dignity and how you would want to be treated. Because, you know what it's like to be you, and you know how you would want somebody else to talk to you and treat you. So that's the way I look at it. Don't know what it's like to be you. It goes to literally everybody except for myself.
It's a great one.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think, and that's kind of what we've talked about on previous episodes. We've touched on the Black Lives Matter, and people are saying, oh, I understand how you feel. I don't, because I've never been Black. I don't know what it's like. I'm going to empathize. I'm going to listen. I'm going to try my best, but I don't understand. I'll never understand. So, because I don't know what it's like to be you. So I think that so hit me when you said that one to me today. I love that one, Pont.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mine kind of made me think of this with the TBT. Somebody came up with this idea, John, right? Or somebody had this idea. And I'm sure a lot of people were like, you're going to do what? Like anybody can enter, but then there's going to be one winner, and they're going to win 6-7 figures of money. And I'm sure people thought that guy was crazy. So doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. So there's a lot of people that would probably have said, you're crazy. You're going to give away what? And no, people just probably thought that he was crazy for thinking that, but only those that are crazy enough to believe that they can change the world actually do. And he might, John, Jennette might not think they're changing the world, but this year there was a lot of tough times in the world. And especially during that time, like Pont said earlier, it gave us hope. It gave us that there's going to be better times. And to think that he could have been doubted and he could have said, oh, you're crazy, John. Okay, you're right. And that doubt set in, could have easily caused him to give up. But it was one of those things that started as 500,000, and then he went to 1 million, and then 2 million. And just the way it was growing, and obviously this year going into the bubble and with everything going on, I don't think it was a step back. Going $1 million to a team, that's pretty incredible. And with everything going on, it gave us hope. And so I'm happy that the leader that you work with, Jennette, was able to put up with people saying, you're crazy. That's not going to work. You're never going to do that. Or people that said, oh, I thought of that idea. He executed. I say this one a lot. Dreams are cheap. Everybody's got dreams, but he acted, and his dream became a reality that's now paid out close to 8 figures worth of cash.
For sure. Yeah, no, those are both great quotes. Like, you guys went deep with your quotes, much deeper than mine, but very applicable. And yeah, no, it's true. And I think this year, more so than ever, we had to all, believe that it could be done, and we're small enough that we could be, nimble and be flexible and constantly, change that plan. At the end of the day, it came down to details too, and being extremely detail oriented, like we all are, and making sure that all those details were executed. So yeah, again, grateful that we made it to the other side, and that everyone came out healthy, and that basketball was played, and that you guys were entertained was also, always a goal as well. But first and foremost, the health of everyone.
Everybody was healthy. That's great. We'd be remiss if we didn't at least touch on the Elam ending. We talked about it a little bit, but for those that don't know, I love it. I think it's just a great way, because you have to stay aggressive. And maybe, Jennette, do you want to talk to somebody out there that maybe doesn't know what that is, kind of explain it, and then we'll jump in and kind of give our thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick Elam is the person who it's named after. So Nick had sent an email to our info back in, it was 2017, I guess, when John read it, and it was like a 90 slide PowerPoint or document, 90-page document that basically he had watched many basketball games and done, the statistics on how at the end of a basketball game, when the team that's losing, is trying to stop the clock, slow down the game, and have a chance to come back, it obviously makes the end of the game a little bit painful to watch, because the final minute ends up taking 15 minutes, and then the percentage of the time when the team that's losing actually comes back and wins is so minimal. And so he had watched all these games and had all these stats, and he had sent it to us, he had sent it to the NBA, other basketball entities, and his theory and suggestion was that if you stop the game clock with the first dead ball under 4 minutes to go, and you set a target score, which is calculated by adding 8 points to the team that's leading at that points score. So if it's 80 to 70, then the target score is 88. You keep the shot clocks on, but you shut off the game clock, and you basically play until a team hits that target score. And so it eliminates the need or the incentive to foul and stop the clock. And it's exciting because every single game now ends on a winning shot. And so it's crazy how hard it obviously is to hit a shot when you have to hit a shot. Like, you can't just dribble out, the final minute and pass the ball and coast to your victory. Like, you have to win it, you have to earn it. And so it's made every game so much more exciting since we implemented it. So back in 2017, we did kind of a trial run at our Jamboree, which was a play-in tournament before the actual tournament. And then in 2018 was the first year that we fully implemented it. And then we did make some tweaks, like you take the free throw now before, if you get fouled and then that's the stoppage of play, you now take the free throw before, if it's the team that's leading, you take that free throw before we set the target score. The first year it wasn't that way. And so it made it, say easier, but if you made the free throws after the target score was set, now you only, needed at that point 5 points because it was a 7-point target score back then. But anyway, so the current process is the adding 8 points, and the NBA implemented it this year at the All-Star game, which if you watch that, I thought it was extremely more exciting to watch than the typical, dunk fest that it is where there's no defense. And to see them actually care at the end during the fourth quarter was really fun to watch. So most of the feedback that I've heard directly has been positive. The players, I think initially it's, whenever there's change, you're a little bit leery and you want to better understand it. And but I think once they saw it in action, and once the coaches also kind of understood it better and knew how to adapt their game plan, and in the fourth quarter, obviously specifically, the first 5 minutes versus, okay, if my team's leading and now it's the Elam ending, I want to, do something to stop the game clock and have the biggest lead possible going into it. So it's interesting how the strategy has also changed, but I think overall, it's just made it a lot more exciting for the fans, and hopefully for the teams as well.
I agree. I think the fact that you can't just take your foot off the gas, the fact that you can't just stall, and that I saw games where teams just dig in and they get stops and they get buckets and they string together 2, 3, 4 stops, and maybe they were down quite a bit, but now instead of hoping and praying the other team misses their free throws to get you back into the game, you just got to get stops because they still have to score. And I think 8's better than 7. I think maybe 9, but I like that there's still pressure for that team to not just say, oh, well, we got this one. We can just stall and just make our free throws and we win. And it doesn't slow down the game. It doesn't make it to where it's just a free throw versus 3 points. I think it's great. Pont, give us your take on it.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of it as well. First and foremost, like you guys mentioned earlier, the excitement of it. Everything ends on a game-winning shot. So it's like, oh, who's going to hit the game winner? I know for the players, the suspense is like, okay, I got to hit the shot right now to end the game. I don't want to give the other team a chance to get back into this thing because obviously everybody's extremely high-level talent at that level in the TBT. So it's like, okay, if I don't hustle, if I let off a little bit now, it's very likely that this other team, very possible, or maybe not likely depending on what the score is, but it's very possible that this other team can come back. So I think that it's great, adds a lot of excitement. And honestly, I'd like to see more leagues implemented, because I think that would be great. I'm a big fan of it personally.
Awesome. I think we will. There have been the New Zealand Basketball League and some smaller stateside leagues I know have been using it, and so there's been a lot of interest and people reaching out about it, and obviously the NBA All-Star Game helped too with the more exposure. But the one thing that annoys me, or that I'm always like, nope, don't do it, is when the team that's leading only needs a 3-pointer to win it, and so they immediately start, like, they want to be the hero, and so they start chucking threes. I'm like, you don't have to do that. Just get whatever the best shot is right now. If it's a 3, great. If it's Diener taking it, obviously he has the green light every time. But yeah, that's the one thing. If any teams are watching or listening, you guys kill me when you start chucking those up there when you don't need to be.
I love that. Diener. You're a hooper and a coach.
It was a good thing having the mask, because then no one can, and sitting on the same side as the camera, so no one can, see what my mouth is saying or try to interpret it or whatever. Or if I'm clapping below the table, no, don't have any favorites. I root for all of them equally. But yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard not to sometimes. Like, what are you doing? No, don't do that. They know what they're doing, obviously.
Take the quick 2, get a stop, and then finish it at the other end. No need to force that 3. I get what you're saying. I really do. I think that's a good point. Well, last question. You said when we first started, you were talking about how one of the first things that drew you was that it was there's a reality piece. And then I know you mentioned another part about the reality, kind of like the show, You're the Weakest Link, Goodbye, or one of those shows. So tell us, what's your go-to reality TV shows?
Oh Lord, it's so bad. I know it's all not quality TV, and I know that it's scripted, but I still watch it, all the trashy ones. So The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. There's another member of my team who actually is male, and he watches it, and we communicate about it on Monday nights. But yeah, it's just terrible. I watch it more so that I can then talk about it with my friends and laugh about it and the ridiculousness than watching it like, oh my God, are they going to fall in love? Like, no, I know it's not real. I know they're going to break up 3 weeks after the final rose. I watch that. I watch a lot of Bravo, all the Real Housewives, and it's terrible. Sometimes I can't. If it's too much yapping and arguing, then it's a headache, and I turn it off. But it's just, mindless entertainment and watching the ridiculousness that other people are doing or the discussions they're having and stuff. But yeah,
That's funny. I tell my wife it's okay, just keep the drama on TV. You're welcome to watch all you want. I won't even make fun of you as long as you keep the drama and all those fights and stuff on not Desperate Housewives, Real Housewives. But that's funny. But the one Bachelor that I knew, or Bachelorette show, I knew one of the Bachelors and he won. And they're still married and they have kids. Chris Siegfried from University of Portland, played pro baseball for a while, minor league baseball, but he got married to
Desiree, right?
Desiree, yes,
Yeah.
Desiree. And they're still together and they're happy, and I see their posts. And I knew Chris, he was a resident in the dorms that I was an RA for and played baseball. So I knew Chris pretty well. And when he was on there, I was like, that's a pretty genuine guy. And then when she picked him, I was like, I think that might work for a while. And they're still together as far as I know.
That's amazing. If there was any couple that I would want you to have known, it would have been that couple, because she was the one, when she was a contestant, that's how they normally cast it. It's if one of the runner-ups is someone who everyone, liked, then that person then becomes the Bachelorette. So when she was a contestant, I was pulling for her. And when she didn't get picked, I was like, seriously, she was the most, down to earth, well-rounded, funny, sweet, whatever. So then when she was the Bachelorette and he was the contestant, I thought the same thing about him. Like, he seems like a really grounded guy, sporty. They would be such a good pair. And so I'm so happy that they are still together. One of the few good, positive stories where they actually stay together. And that's so funny that you knew them or knew him.
How about Jersey Shore? Any Jersey Shore fans in here?
Yeah. Yeah, all of it.
Don't be ashamed.
Excited, she is.
Do not be ashamed.
Not the reunion stuff, though. I haven't watched it as of late. So, but back in the day, I did.
I never watched it real time, but then they had it on Hulu, and I was just addicted to it. I was like, oh, my goodness, this is amazing. Sam and Ronnie are always fighting, and this and that's going on. And I was like, this is all right.
It's so interesting, the revival of some of these shows, and, people watching it that didn't watch it in real time, what their take is. Like, even The Last Dance, people that, like, I don't know, Pont, how old you were, if you were alive yet during Michael Jordan's reign, but no, not even. But that was
1999. I was born.
We're born
He was
in
born after he retired, Jennette.
Oh my God.
I pull out stuff and I'm like, Pa, you don't know what that is? You don't know about TGIF, Friday nights, Full House?
Oh my God. So it's interesting though, hearing the feedback from people that are watching The Last Dance and kind of getting a better sense of how incredible he was and that he is the GOAT. And it's just, it's awesome to relive it for those of us who did get to watch him live back in the 90s. But I'm assuming you did watch The Last Dance and might have some new thoughts on MJ, Pont. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it all too. Pont, what'd you think? What was your takeaway from that competitor?
I was sitting there religiously every night in front of the TV waiting for it to come on because my dad and I both, that was like the highlight of our weeks, was watching The Last Dance together. I'm all for his type of leadership. So me personally, I loved it. If that's what's necessary, that's what's necessary. Now, there's a lot of people in my age group, in my generation, that's like, oh my gosh, he's such a-hole, for lack of better terms, and this and that. I think he's great. I mean, I think the guy is amazing, and obviously the guy has a lot to show for it. So I think that what he was doing was working, and I would definitely appreciate it if I was on his team.
Love it. Would you say that did you, prior to watching The Last Dance, think that he was the GOAT? I guess is the first question.
This is gonna spark a whole new flame. Yes, he's the GOAT. I think he's the greatest. I think his legacy is unmatched. I'll take LeBron over him as a player, which might be crazy. It's probably crazy. Everybody tells me. But I think that MJ has the greatest legacy. I think he's the greatest of all time for sure.
And what he did, he changed the game too, right? The shoe game. He changed like basketball, like wasn't very big. I mean, obviously Bird and Magic, it was starting to turn, but then he took it to the international level where everybody was watching the NBA and wanting the Jordans and the newest pair of shoes. So he just revolutionized it that way. Plus he won 6 rings and did it with different teams. Obviously it had Scotty, but just, the greatest of all time.
I just remember it didn't matter. I felt like no matter what the score was, how many points down the Bulls were, as long as MJ was out there, didn't matter if he had the flu or anything, he would find a way to win the game. And that's, the time period when I started really tuning into the NBA, and a time period when players were very loyal to their team, whether it was, the Knicks or the Pacers or the Bulls, and there was legitimate rivalries and hatred for the other teams. And so there was just a lot of respect for those guys and the way that they played, and things have evolved since then. But yeah, MJ I think is hands down the greatest of all time, just because he could take over whenever he needed to win the game. And like you said, Brant, whether it's Steve Kerr, other guys around him, he I think made everyone better. To your point, Pont, about the way that he led, which some of that stuff I wasn't fully aware of back in the 90s, but so The Last Dance was informative for me as well, with some of the guys that he ragged on to elevate their game and everything. But yeah, it was awesome to be able to relive all those memories in those games.
That loyalty now is unfortunately just out the window. Like, it's not even close to existing anymore. Everybody's just trying to get their ring and do what they got to do. And I'm going to go to this team and that team and play with this guy.
Not Dame Lillard. Dame Lillard.
Dame is in Portland to stay.
Rip City, baby.
Dame is in Portland to stay. Dame time is upon us.
What?
Paul Pierce for the Celtics was my, last, I feel like, real loyal player, being there for whatever it was, 18. No, that's Tom Brady was 19. How many was Pierce? I don't know. A long time. He was there over a decade.
He was loyal.
So that he was there when Celtics were at the bottom of the league. And so finally when KG and Ray came and we had the 2008 team, it was awesome and great for a few years. And they're great now, just a young team, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, Paul Pierce, PP, was a hometown favorite and very loyal throughout.
Brad Stevens is a great young coach. I think they're going to keep getting better. Jason Tatum, they got some guys.
You get the guys.
You know what? That 2008 Celtics team was actually the team. I was very young, obviously. That's the team that got me into basketball because somebody bought me either for my birthday or Christmas, NBA Live 08. And, in alphabetical order, how everything shows up in alphabetical order. So it was the Atlanta Hawks versus the Boston Celtics was the first thing that came up. And I was like, okay, Boston's on the right. I'm right-handed. So I went to the right. And then I was playing this Kevin Garnett. He was by far he blew me away in the game. He was just a beast, obviously. Ray Allen shooting, Paul Pierce shooting. Rondo wasn't quite, the player that he became yet, but, he's still dishing out everything. I was like, this team's awesome. So it really got me into basketball.
That's awesome. They were very fun to watch. I actually, in one of my past lives, when I worked for the Celtics, it was back when the big three was Antoine Walker, Paul Pierce, and Kenny Anderson. And they made the playoffs, but they did not win with those guys. But that's when I, was becoming an even bigger Celtics fan. Even before then, D Brown and Rick Fox and all those guys too, again, when they weren't the greatest. But that's awesome that the 2008 team was the reason, or when you started getting into it. And it's a good team to pick. I'm glad you picked right, literally and figuratively. Right.
Ray Allen, Jesus. I mean, the guy, his pure stroke. Ray. Yeah, he was one of my favorite shooters. But Big Baby, Davis.
Mm-hmm. A lot of characters. Nate Robinson was, or that was the following year. There's one year where he jumped on his back. I don't know if you remember that. There's a funny picture of that from the playoffs. But yeah, they had some really big role players too. Posey and all those guys. 2008 was a great team. I went to the parade and ran along beside it. Saw it from 3 different points. Just like when you have waited for a long time for a championship, you never know when it's going to happen again. And so it was 2004 Red Sox, which obviously minus 5 years is what Pont was at that point, 2004. But yeah, I never thought I'd see them win again. And so you got to appreciate the moment and celebrate. But thankfully, like we started talking about with Boston sports, it's been a good run that they've had. So
Kurt Schilling in the bloody sock. I was at that game, by the way.
Were you at that game?
Crazy sports story. I was at Yankees Red Sox Game 6 of the ALCS in 04. Crazy.
You don't want to get me started. You don't want to open that can. I was at Game 5 of the ALCS when Big Papi had the walk-off in the 14th inning, and I was at the clinching game of the ALDS that year. I was at the A-Rod Veritech fight game. I was on the Green Monster for that one. That was like the turning point. That could be a separate podcast. You can be Red Sox, Yankees.
We could go. When we talked this afternoon, we said we might have to just turn out the lights because we would just keep talking sports.
Got the computer on me. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, hey, we really appreciate you joining us. Definitely learned a lot about the TBT, and so I appreciate you sharing with us. And we're gonna say good things and try to help hype it up. And maybe a DePaul alumni team coach or GM, maybe the walk-on GM, maybe.
Hey, if you have me, I will come play in that tournament after my time at DePaul. 110,000%.
I think any team can kind of enter, right? And then you just got to win, winning.
It's one of the many unique elements of TBT. It's open to all. And so, the initial thoughts were you could have this average Joe team playing against former NBA pros, and that's happened many times, including this year a little bit with Ott Elmore playing against Joe Johnson. It was highly entertaining to watch on site, and he was a character. He was a lot of fun to have. So we love it. Everyone and anyone is welcome to play in TBT.
That was awesome. That was a great story. Just the average Joe versus ISO Joe.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He was saying in the post-game press conference, he's saying, these guys are playing in the NBA and I'm playing at the YMCA. And that clip I know got picked up by some different sources. And then when he was hitting his shots in one of the games, he had a couple of threes, and he said there's active shooter in the building, was his quote, as he ran down the court. And we can all hear it. There's no fans in the stands. That was also a very unique, funny aspect of the event this year, where you literally, if like the cameraman yawned, everyone heard it. You could not, anything you said was going to be heard. And so we heard what the players were saying. Maybe you guys heard it on TV as well. But yeah, it was an entertaining team to have involved this year, and him in particular.
That's awesome. Well, hey, we really do appreciate it. It was awesome getting to chat with you. Pont, what do you got?
Well, I just want to tell everybody again, thank you very much for tuning in. Jennette, you were amazing. Thank you very much for shedding some light on this. And hey, B Minor, why don't we send them off with, at the end of the day, if you're going to walk on.
Did we get it? Was it on?
I think we got it. I think that was on point. Just a couple walk-ons being walk-ons.
Cut it. All right, we got it. If you're going to walk on.